Oh, right. So
Yeah,
I didn't realize
yeah.
that.
So we post the teachings on our YouTube channel, available for everyone. So I think because of time zone differences and other,
Yeah.
things, but a lot of people watch. So I
Oh,
feel
I
happy
see.
that even though there is few here online, many
Uh-huh.
people get to benefit from the book and from your explanations.
Okay. Oh, that's good. I didn't realize that. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, what's the last one? So we're gonna, I mean, basically we've only actually covered, you see, we're about halfway
Yeah.
through. So I don't know. I thought I would just read through, and skip over those bits and just pick out salient points if I can. It's going to be very difficult because there's so much in this book. I don't know. I would just say that, the best thing is to get it and then read it. So, last time we were talking about Tantra, and then the book moves on to sort of basic Buddhism, about Sutra, sorry, Essence of Buddhism, which is, the four truths, the two truths, and the three types of sufferings, and so forth. And then there's quite a bit about sort of directed at Tibetans themselves. His Holiness is talking to Tibetans themselves about trying to sort of bring them into the 21st century. So I don't think we need to look at that. And then the last bit is about this 125 little biographies of famous, or not famous, but of women practitioners who have not been really recognized. And I thought I would just read through those as much as I can, because I don't know what else I can do. I don't know. They're very short biographies. Yeah. And look at that. And if there's anything you want to talk about or discuss, then please do. Um, so we were talking about Tantra. And His Holiness says the a general method in highest yoga tantra of generating the subtle mind into the entity of the path is that the coarse winds and consciousnesses are forcibly halted and the subtle primordial mind is applied to the path. So in tantra, the best type of mind is the subtle mind, the primordial mind. When you read about the primordial mind or the Samantrabhadra mind or the clear light nature, in other traditions, they basically are talking about this a very subtle level of consciousness, which is not immediately apparent to us in our normal lives, but it is naturally occurs in at death, when it can be used by advanced practitioners. But it's a subtle mind focused on a subtle subject, so it is far more profound than just our general force mind meditating on the general nature of phenomena, which is one of the reasons why Tantra is hailed as being quite special, because it doesn't use an ordinary mind. It uses a subtle mind, whereas other practices use ordinary mind. So the course and the way that the subtle mind is activated is by bringing the coarse winds into the central channel. They are stopped from flowing into the normal right and left channels. They're brought into the main central channel, and they're brought into that, and that activates this subtle primordial mind. And whether it's brought in through the practices of Tumon, Chandali, what's it called? Inner heat practices, which is a way of bringing these consciousness into the central channel, or by any other means, whatever it is a way of activating the subtle mind in meditation in this life, as opposed to it naturally arising in death, which is what basically the completion or perfection stage of Tantra is all about. It's bringing those in. So he says here, the general method in highest yoga Tantra of generating this subtle mind into the entity of the path is that the coarse winds and the consciousness are forcibly halted and the subtle primordial mind is applied to the path. That's it. That's basic. That is basic bottom line of perfection stage Tantra. In
Gavin,
completion,
what page are you on?
263.
Thank you.
And in the completion stage, that's so. In the generation stage, which is essentially visualization stage, where the mind is actively, the consciousness is actively used to create, in the imagination, various deities. This is not necessarily done by the primordial mind, but by the coarse mind. So the generation stage and the perfection stage are quite different. The generation stage is just like a preparation. It's a ripening. The visualizing yourself as a deity and so forth is a ripening or a preparation for the perfection stage, where things actually happen. In the generation stage, things don't actually happen. You do not become a deity, even though you visualize yourself as one. So he talks about this. So therefore, and there are different methods of halting the winds and consciousness. Penetrative focusing upon the channels and the winds, the drops. That is, focusing the mind on the various points, the heart and the navel, where the chakras are, and wherever you focus the mind, the winds will automatically concentrate there. And with the focus of the wind and the mind, this brings everything to those points. And so for wind yogas, penetrative focusing upon the four joys and non-conceptual meditation alone. Mahamudra and Dzogchen are included in the category of non-conceptual meditations that do not imply penetrative focusing upon the channels, winds, and drops. In Gelugpa, you cannot really activate the subtle mind without bringing these winds into the central channel. But in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, you can do it through a non-conceptual meditation, which is based very much upon devotion to the guru, who introduces you to the subtle mind, the Samantra Bhadra mind. They have a special way of developing this primordial mind, which is non-conceptual, without necessarily going through the tantric path of penetrating the subtle points of the body. So a little bit different there. He says that. And so in the perfection of wisdom vehicle, wisdom, this is the bottom paragraph now. In the perfection of wisdom vehicle, wisdom held by method is the wisdom cognizing emptiness held by bodhicitta, and method held by wisdom refers to the meditation on the non-apprehension of the agent, activity, and object. So normally in non-tantric practices, when we meditate on wisdom, i.e., when we try and find the I that exists separate to the aggregates, where we look for this sort of real appearing sort of entity of a self, they meditate on wisdom. In the background, there is, but we're doing it as a bodhicitta practice. But when one is actually meditating on emptiness, there is not really, bodhicitta is not really present in the mind, because especially when you meditate to the point of gaining direct perception of emptiness, I say on the path of seeing, at that point there's a debate about, at that point, where is the bodhicitta? Is it there, or is it sort of in the background, or so? But the point being is that when you meditate on wisdom, that wisdom is held. The word held means it's sort of grasped by bodhicitta, and so, but it's kind of in the background. And then conversely, when you meditate on the practices of the bodhisattva practices, such as giving and patience and morality and so forth, when you do these bodhisattva practices, this is practice of bodhicitta. It is the method side. It is the development of the causes necessary to create the form body of the Buddha. But at the same time, that is held by an understanding of emptiness, or at least an understanding of the dependent arising nature of all phenomena. It doesn't mean to say that you have to have directly perceived emptiness, but at the background, there is a kind of a sort of recollection You know, when you're doing something, when the example is when you're giving, you know, there is you who is giving, there is the act of giving, and there is the person you are giving to. Those three. And when you're actually giving, there's a kind of memory, it's a kind of a lack of memory or a recall that neither of these things exist the way that they appear. So the giving is done the giving is done with a held by or seized by or grasped by, you know, understanding of emptiness. And often when an emptiness is recalled in daily life, when you're not meditating directly on emptiness, it is called a dremba. A dremba means like a memory. A dremba, it's a kind of recall. You know, it's one of the four. You recall it, you remember it, you bring it to mind. So when you get angry, or when something is exciting you, or you see something that produces some emotion, at the back of your mind, you try and remember that these things don't exist as the way they appear. You know, so you've got these two, method and wisdom, always working hand in hand, but they are not one. They are not in. They are not inseparable. They are joined. They are kind of like helping each other, but they're not one. But in Tantra, they are one. That's the difference. So he says here, in the perfection of wisdom vehicle, wisdom held by method is the wisdom cognizing evidence held by bodhicitta, and method held by wisdom refers to the meditation on the non-apprehension of agent, activity, and object during the practices of giving, and so on. Thus, practices carried out with method and wisdom combined. In Tantra, in general, and specifically in highest yoga Tantra, method and wisdom are produced inseparably within one cognition. So in Sutra, the cognitions is not one cognition, because the cognition of emptiness is not the cognition of bodhicitta, and the sort of the understanding of bodhicitta, like when you're giving something to a beggar, and you are sort of that act of selflessness, that sort of not holding on to your own wealth, you know, that mind and the mind that of emptiness that holds it, they're not the same mind. They're sort of like ones in the background kind of thing. But in Tantra, they are one. This is the big thing. They are one. They are produced inseparably within one cognition, and that inseparability of method and wisdom has to appear to the primordial mind, right? So then that inseparability is not, again, and is not just done with ordinary mind, like when you're giving, but to the primordial mind. So you've got this primordial mind in which both method and wisdom, the aspect of understanding all things not to be truly existent, and at the same time, for example, all things being in the nature of the deity, they are one mind. That is one cognition, yeah. Therefore, method and wisdom, complete within a single primordial mind, is the ultimate position of the Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma, Geluk, and other Buddhist traditions of Tibet. So that is essentially the tantric position or philosophical tenet of Tantra as compared to Sutra. So it says from the four bodies of an enlightened being, the wisdom Dharma body, the enjoyment body, and the emanated body are composite phenomena and dependent upon previous causes. The materials needed to produce these bodies are winds and minds. Therefore, in reliance upon the primordial innate wisdom and clear light mind generated into an entity of yoga, the practices of deity yoga, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, union of clarity and emptiness, that's the Sakya, and innate wisdom all come down to the same intent. His Holiness here is talking about the sort of kind of non-sectarian approach to the Gelugpa and the Nyingma Akadyu, which has sometimes caused a bit of problem in the past. He's saying they basically come down to the same thing. They all follow this same point, that the four bodies, the three bodies anyway, are composite phenomena. That means they have causes. They don't just arise, and they're not things that have always been there. Although in some some of the other schools, some schools will talk about the Dharmakaya being naturally there, or all sentient beings are Buddhas. This is not literally the case, because what they're referring to is the subtle primordial mind is always there. But the actual enjoyment body, the emanated body, and the wisdom of the Dharmakaya, they're dependent on previous causes. And the causes, the materials needed, therefore, are the winds and the minds. The wind produces the form body, the wind produces the sort of Sambhogakaya and the Manakaya, and the consciousness produces the Dharmakaya. So these two together, wind and mind, which are like sort of horse and the rider, those two together is what travels to enlightenment. Therefore, and in their reliance upon the primordial innate wisdom and clear light mind generated into an entity of yoga, the practice of deity yoga, that's what deity yoga is. Deity yoga is the practice of using the wind and the mind as causes that will travel to these four bodies. Panchen Losson Chugen said, Panchen Losson Chuki Gelsen, in his, he said, when examined by those who are learned in reasoning and scripture on the definitive meaning, and by those yogis with experience, they are seen to be of one intent. He's talking about all these four schools. This is in his famous Geluk Khaju Mahamudra, which I think Alex did, actually, Alex Berzin. Maybe you helped with it too, John. I can't remember. But this famous text where he talks about the sort of the Gelukpa and Khaju Mahamudra, he says basically that all these four schools, or the four traditions of Tibet, essentially talking about, they come to the same intent, Gongpa Chikpa, which means that they actually, they may be different in their paths, and they may be different with their names, but actually they eventually come down to the same point, which is so is it the fact that so yes. Okay. So, generally, when practicing the profound teachings of Tantra, emptiness as an object is no different to that of the perfection vehicle. However, the subject consciousness is not an ordinary consciousness, but is held by great bliss, and this is superior. This is the bliss of the primordial mind. For the reality of the mind to be made manifest, the basis on which that manifested depends must be a pure basis. That is to say that in Tantra, you have to have a mind that is primordial and at least is subtle, but is not a coarse mind. You cannot practice Tantra really on the basis of an impure mind. Therefore, it is taught that the reality of emptiness must be ascertained on a basis uncontaminated by ordinary appearance and apprehension of that appearance. So the reason in Tantra is when you meditate, you visualize the self as deity and the mandala of the deities as a surrounding. This is called having a divine, what's it called? Divine pride, a kind of a pure appearance of the world and yourself. On that basis, you can meditate on emptiness, and then further on, if you can bring in the subtle mind, even also, that also is another pure basis. So that makes Tantra superior to the perfection vehicle or to the sutra vehicle because of these methods. Generally, there is no difference in the emptiness found in all existence. And so it is explained that the lack of true existence perceived upon a sprout and the lack of true existence perceived on the deity are identical. However, deity yoga must be practiced by entering meditation on emptiness dependent upon a pure basis. That's why the necessity of the generation stage, you need to ripen the mind stream, the in the generation stage, that which is to be refuted is the is ordinary view and ordinary clinging to ordinary views and ordinary view. Those is what have to be negated. You have to get rid of those. You know, that is the negation or the refutation of the generation stage. Emptiness is the mere negation of that to be negated. But when understanding emptiness, it is important that it is understood as existing within the realm of appearance. This is because it has to be understood as being the significance of arising by dependence. So some of the criticisms that you hear about maybe some of Gelugpa or the emphasis upon Madhyamaka or upon the second turning of wheel of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras is that it's all negating, negate. None of this. There is no form, there is no feelings, there's nothing. It's all negating, right? And whereas in the third turning of wheel, it's more affirmation. You know, there's Gakpa and Drupa. There's more affirmation. There is this. There is the nature of mind is bliss, and all sentient beings are Buddha. So they're kind of differentiated. These two, but you know, his Holiness often says this is unfair. This is not a correct criticism, because when you are understanding of emptiness, yes, it's true. You have to sort of you have to negate that which is to be negated. It is a negation. You know, emptiness is a direct negation. It's not negating something and then something else appears in its place. Not that. It is the not direct negation of things appearing to have some kind of innate intrinsic existence without any kind of dependence upon anything else. That is Madhyamaka. That is Madhyamaka, negating the cause of samsara, the cause of suffering, the cause of anger, the cause of desire. All comes down to this thing that is to be negated, which is this thing, which is this appearance, this innate natural appearance of things existing as having some kind of reality. That is what has to be negated in Madhyamaka and in anything really, because that is the cause of suffering. However, when understanding emptiness, especially in Tantra, where emptiness is understood, you know, things have to be understood as within the realm of appearance. Therefore, that is why things appear as dreams, as like illusions, as they're not real. They are like the magicians magically created elephants. You know, all those examples that they use in the scriptures, because emptiness must be understood as being the significance of dependent arising. So in Madhyamaka, dependent arising, emptiness are the two sides of the same coin. You know, by negating true existence, you are not negating cause and effect. The two work together, and in Tantra, this is very important. For the practice of Tantra, the texts say that one has to have either a Madhyamaka view or a Chittamatra view. So you have to have those views. You know, you cannot practice Tantra without an understanding of some kind of level of emptiness, whether it's a Chittamatra view of emptiness, which basically says that you know, all existence is nothing more than the arising of sort of imprints of the mind, and therefore there is no innate or intrinsic difference between the consciousness and object of consciousness in mind only. There is that, or it's the Madhyamaka view. So to practice Tantra without an understanding of emptiness is won't get very, very far.
Gavin,
yes.
You were just mentioning that we do a lot of negation, but there is also an aspect of affirmation in the third turning. Can you just say a little bit about what this affirmation looks like, so we don't see it as something real?
Generally speaking, affirmation is saying something is something, right? Okay, this is a pen. This is an affirmation, right? That's an affirmation, because it's not that. Whoops, it's a dropped pen. This is no negation here, right? There's no negation. It is an affirmation. Affirmation is Druva in Tibetan. It means that you do not, you something is cognized without negation, without anything being negated, right? It's a direct cognition of, for example, the sensory, consciousness. They perceive through affirmation. They just affirm that this is here, this is here, this is there. So in Majamaka, they say, Mata macheba ye. If you don't examine and you don't analyze, it's there, right? It's there. Things are there. There is this. There is a pen. Right? There is this. There is. But when you read the Prajna Paramita Sutras, they say there is no pen. There is no this. This is negation. This is negation. But it's not negating the pen. It's negating the way the pen exists to the ordinary mind. That is negation. And so you've got negation and affirmation. Now, in the third turning of in the second turning, the emphasis is very much upon the object of the mind, which is called the lumen, is the object of the mind, the clear light. No, it's very much on the negation of phenomena existing in the way that it appears. Whereas in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the emphasis is upon the clear light nature of the mind. That the mind is this, the mind is that. There's very much affirmation insofar as there is things are affirmed. All sentient beings are Buddha. There is, and if you read, it seems to me that a lot of the tantric texts of Dzogchen and Mahamudra, about which I know very, very little, but I've come across a few of them in my translating. They emphasize very much this second turning wheel idea of affirming things, affirming. Now I can see that affirming and negating, they look as if they're kind of in contrast, aren't they? But they're not, because in Majjhimaka, negating is a analysis based upon a final final examination of the phenomena. I was doing something by Panchen Losung Chogyal. Panchen Losung Chogyal Gelsen who was the fourth Panchen Lama at the time of the fifth Dalai Lama. His works on emptiness are fabulous. He has this kind of way of talking, which is, he's very joyful about his understanding of emptiness. And he says that he says, when you look at emptiness, and when you look at the reality of something, that something is there, is there. When you look at the thing itself, it disappears into emptiness, right? So you've got this gokpa and this druppa, this negation and affirmation existing in one thing, in one cognition. So that, because there are two levels of truths. One level of truth is negation. The ultimate level of truth, there is nothing that can be found. There's nothing here, there's nothing there. It's kind of negation. But on the conventional, there is, that we affirm this is this, this is this. If you do this, this happens. If you're good, you'll be happy. If you're bad, you won't. This is affirmation, but they don't contradict. They exist, and they coexist like that. So that is what it means.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
May I ask something? Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you. Well, I have still, ongoing fundamental question, which is how, by being aware, hopefully, on, the sort of wisdom of emptiness on the intellectual level, or understanding, that each phenomena, of course, has causes and can change, and all of this, what we are talking about, really helps on a practical level. Because this is the aim, I think, of all of these teachings. How does it really help on the practical level, really to get rid of, I don't know, negative emotions, or solving any difficult situation, or
well, Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it does. It helps a lot because the idea that things that appear, if you reach to the point where you understand things existing as apparitions or like dreams are not real, then when something arises, say like some great fear, something you're worried about, some anxiety which causes pain or suffering, or some jealousy, some desire, some anger, at that time there is something which appears real. If there was nothing that appeared real, you wouldn't get angry, you wouldn't get desire, you wouldn't get anxious. If the fact it's these emotions suggest that there is something appearing as some kind of reality, which has an emotive effect upon us. The understanding that the object doesn't really necessarily, doesn't exist with that kind of reality, will immediately lessen the desire, lessen the anger, because hey, it's like a dream. When you wake up from a dream, I mean, it's happened to me. I woke up from a dream. It was a very strong dream, wasn't anything special, but it was quite powerful. And for a minute or so, I'm sure this happened to you, I still believed, and oh my God, and then suddenly, oh yes, it's just a dream. It's just a dream. And then the moment that gone. So this is the way that understanding of the Madhyamaka philosophy of things having appearance. Yes, they exist. Of course they do. But at the same time, they don't have any kind of reality that can be pointed at, say, this is this is that it helps live our lives in the way, like that famous example, like a bird flying through the sky doesn't leave any footprint, whatever it leaves. It doesn't leave, there's nothing left behind, right? It just flies through the sky. It's not like walking on a muddy path where you leave prints. Nothing's left behind. And so it's possible to lessen. Even if you follow the Chittamatra view, also, where things appear, but if you understand, well, hey, this is just my own mind, a creation of my own mind, because if I'm frightened of spiders or something, and the person next to me, they're not frightened of spiders. Why? How come I am and they are not? It's the same spider, and if you understand, well, because this experience is nothing, a creation of my own mind. There is no external fear out there. Yeah. Then this lessens the it lessens the fear. It lessens so absolutely. I mean, it does have, and His Holiness often talks about this. How in his life, his meditation on emptiness and dependent arising has helped him so much in sort of in being able to deal with life. And Panchen Losson Chiki Gerson, he talks about that. I just where is it? He's very good, Lawson. He's very good, Panchen Losson Chigi. He talks about, where does he go? Yeah, you can read. There's one. He goes out. He's sitting by the lake. Is this him? And there's Shapa Kelly. Oh yeah, no. He goes outside the monastery at Tashilumbo, wherever he was, and he goes and sits by the mountains, and he just sits there having a rest. Just getting away from all the monastic life, and he looks at the mountains, and he meditates, and this whole beautiful sort of idea of how these things appear, but they're not real. Then there's the joy of his mind comes through. I can't. I translate it. It's on my computer. I've got it somewhere, but it's I'm going to find it for you because I am. 4 songs by Panchen Lama, Panchen Rinpoche. One day, in order to refresh body and mind, I traveled to the side of Ganden Mountain. There before me, the variety of landscape pictures and appearance, open and without hindrance. On examining the way they appeared, phenomena, whether afflicted or pure, were empty of any entity, and yet lacking entity, appearing in a variety of forms, appearing and empty, a unity without contradiction. What joy in such unfathomability! This I saw by sustaining the nature of what appeared. That means that, you know, the middle way is to sort of tread this tightrope of like not falling into they do exist and not falling into they don't exist, but this kind of sort of this is middle way of holding the balance between these two, but sustaining these things, you know. And so, and then he says, now even if I burn for aeons in the flames of the deepest hell, I have no fear. I have no fear. When being burnt by the flames in a dream, where is the burning? Where is the burner? Where is the burnt? Therefore, for the glories of samsara, I have not the slightest ambition or attachment. These things are created by an illusionist. You know, this is not a teaching tradition of dry words. It is a glorious and blessed tradition without decline from the renowned father, that's Tsongkhapa, the teachings of the Venerable, through which I am satisfied. And, you know, so forth. He goes on like this, and there's quite a lot. Where are you? Yeah. So like that. It definitely.
That's very beautiful, Gavin. Is that
Yeah.
is that a translation you're working on, or is that already
Yeah.
translated
It's this
someone?
book. This is a book of it's an anthology of advice and songs. Not songs in the, what as we know them, but you know, the spiritual song. And this is in Tripton Jinpa's series. There's about over 100 different, and they're all very short texts. And
Is there an English translation?
yeah, what do you mean? Is it English?
Is it translated into English, what you're reading from?
Yeah, it's what I translate. It's my own translating, my own
Oh,
translation.
is it published?
No, not yet.
Oh,
I'm nearly finished. You know,
oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful. It's really beautiful what you just read.
he's a very beautiful Lama. You know, he wrote another book. He wrote this book here, which is in Tibetan. It's a conversation between ignorance and wisdom.
Ah, yes.
It's a kind of debate between, you know, and ignorance says one thing, wisdom says the other, and it's quite a profound book. And the Dalai Lama has mentioned this book as being very had a strong effect on him. Yeah, so Panchen Losang Chögyam was a very kind man. He comes across as very gentle. He wasn't wrathful, and he had to deal with a lot of things. You know, there was the Mongolian invasion, and the fifth Dalai Lama was being appointed to as leader of Tibet. At the same time, there were the troubles in Sang, where with the Sang kings who are fighting the Gelugpa, and then there was all this going on. Then also with the you know, the discovery of the sixth Dalai Lama and all the troubles there, and people not accepting the sixth Dalai Lama. I mean, he had to put up with a lot, and I think he did it with great aplomb and great calmness. And I haven't really, you know, of course he wrote Lama Chöpa, right? I mean, because I haven't really had much, you know, read much of his stuff, but you know, the little I'm very impressed by him. Very, you know, each of these lamas, these great masters, they've got their own personality. They're not all the same. You know, if you can get to their personality, you know, he's yeah, he talks a lot about that. Shall we go on? Where am I? Oh yeah, okay. I don't know where I am now. There are reasons why 270. There are reasons why the various forms of deities to be practiced in why there are various forms of deities to be practiced in. I may have read this before. Those who develop bodhicitta mind aimed at the achievement of enlightenment to aspire to fulfill the welfare of others. Therefore, at the time of attaining Buddhahood, an enlightened form, for the welfare of others will effortlessly and spontaneously appear. So that explains the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, because they come from the attainment of the Dharmakaya. So there's the three bodies. Then here, the word appear is within a place of appearance, in the same way that the reflection of the moon appears in dependence upon the place of appearance, right? The size of the moon's reflection, its level of clarity, depend on the receptacle that holds the water and on the place of the appearance itself. You know, like if the pond is small, if it's dirty, if the waves are rough, will affect the kind of reflection itself, and whether it's big or small. So it's the same moon, but it appears differently because of different circumstances. Likewise, it's the same Dharmakaya, but it appears differently according to various conditions. And those conditions are within us. We are the dirty pond. We are the pond with the ripples. You know, it's because of us that it appears that way. It is the same with the appearance of enlightened form for the welfare of disciples, in dependence upon the type, dispositions, karmic propensities of individual disciples. The various qualities of wisdom, compassion, and abilities of a Buddha appear to the mind of the practitioner as the various faces, limbs, and bodily forms of a deity. This is Amy's question last time about are the deities we pray to are they real? That this is how they should be understood, like that. I think that's quite a good. Then in the book there are two very I'm not going to go through. There are two long quotations. One is from Lama Tsongkhapa in Ngarim Chemo, which is his secret mantra, great exposition of secret mantra. There's a long quotation there, which I think His Holiness asked Dari Rinpoche to find, which is essentially about the nature of the four empowerments in Tantra and what they do. Then there's another one by the seventh Dalai Lama, Kazan Gyatso, in which he explains how the attainment of Buddhahood is not possible without Tantra. You cannot become a Buddha purely through the perfection vehicle. You have to rely upon Tantra. And I don't want to go into that because it's quite complicated. So there is that. And then is a section about who should practice Tantra. Then is another section on the great vehicle is the word of the Buddha, because a lot of people say that the Mahayana and the Tantra, these came later. What the Buddha said was basically what is said in the Pali canon. Everything else was added on later. And so therefore it's not the word of the Buddha. A lot of people say this. There's a whole chapter here on the reasons, why that isn't so. His Holiness is quite critical of Western scholars. He says something like, Nagarjuna was in 1st century or 2nd century, about 800 years or something after the Buddha. Western scholars, and he was Indian. He was the same country as the Buddha. Western scholars, they're 2,500 years after the Buddha, and they're in another country, what do they know? Well, he doesn't quite say it like that, but there is a sort of way of him saying that, Nagarjuna said that the Mahayana teachings were the word of the Buddha, and also he says, if you say that the teachings of Nagarjuna and so forth are far more, the Mahayana are far more how we say that were not taught by the original Buddha, then you have to say that Nagarjuna is wiser or more enlightened than the Buddha. So there's a whole lot of reasons here why he says that the Mahayana teachings are in fact the words of the Buddha. Then he goes on to how is this basically aimed at Tibetans now, how you shouldn't supplicate gods and spirits. What is captivating when examining, this is page 301, What is captivating when examining the Sutra and Tantra practices of our kind teacher, the Buddha, are the vast and deep meanings of the teachings on what is to be acquired and discarded within the doctrine of the Four Truths. In understanding the reasoning behind that, we develop faith and find firm conviction that the Buddha who taught this wonderful path is like no other. It is, in short, it is love, compassion, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness, the very essence of the Buddhist doctrine that is captivating, not the splendor of some deity, you know. These days, there is a pressing need for the doctrine of Buddha to be seen and heard as vast and profound, and in dependence upon that as something that can bring about the wonderful qualities of peace and happiness. However, most monasteries, temples of all sizes, and even individual monastic quarters display in full view various representations of tantric deities, numerous faces, numerous hands and legs, gaping mouths, protruding fangs, embracing a consort. The air is filled with the clamor of drums, cymbals, and horns. As a result, even in photographic books on Buddhism, it is these kinds of things that are displayed. Also, rituals such as Lama dances are being used as a means for introducing Buddhism. He doesn't like that. Consequently, these days, this particular aspect of Tibetan Buddhism has become well known and not even a part of the wonderful path of peace with its depth and vastness are seen. Though he's lamenting the fact that if you open a coffee book on Tibetan Buddhism, the first thing you'll see is sort of deities with their faces and bells and dhammarus, and because, hey, it has photographic sort of, it hits you, right? No one wants to hear about Madhyamaka or Chittamatra debate about whether things exist externally or not. No one know about that. They just want to see all these wonderful deities, So also he says that, in a lot of temples, you go in temple and the Buddha's not there at all. Moreover, and if the, if there are the Buddha, then in front of the Buddha, there are just one or two lamps with no grand offerings. However, you go inside the Practitioner chapels and shrine rooms with their unique dark atmosphere. People talk about Mahakala, Pelton Lama, and others, various forms with bared fangs, blood-filled skull cups, weapons and arrows and swords and spears. Walking inside, people are filled with awe and respect. Everywhere on the walls, inside and out, are terrifying depictions of rosaries made from human heads, entrails, flesh, blood, skin, bones, and so on, from all the bodies of wretched beings. There are weapons to threaten the lives of sentient beings, outer carcasses of animals, breath pouches, and so on. These gods and demons and ghosts are terrifying as possible and made to look as if they're just about to leap into action. Wonderful. Anyway, so he's saying, this is overemphasis upon the wrong, too much emphasis on this type of thing, and not enough emphasis on the true nature of Buddhism, which is the Four Truths and emptiness and compassion. To explain this behavior, this is an explanation of the feelings of fear inherent in human beings and create all kinds of tensions. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will not cause harm. Bodhicitta and the view of emptiness, which is the heart of Buddhism, will never create fear in people. However, when seeing these frightening figures with their gaping mouths and bared fangs, we wonder if they're going to hurt us, while at the same time regarding them as very special. This way of thinking has no place in the conduct required of Buddhist practice and is a mistaken attitude that lies outside of genuine practice, full stop. Amen. So he's very, I think he's talking mainly to Tibetans here. But, it is something that he feels quite strongly about, isn't it? He said once a Japanese person came to see him in Dharamsala who had just been to Tibet, and the Japanese person told him he was visiting all these protector chapels in Tibet and all these faces, and he said, I was really frightened, I was really scared. And he said, look, Buddhism is not there to scare you. It's not there to make you frightened, no? So there. So you know, and also he also goes on and talks about how sometimes, you know, we tend to focus on one tiny little text and see that as being the sort of the essence of Buddhism. And also he talks about divination more, you know, more. In divination texts, when omens are bad, you will usually find passages on supplication of gods and spirits to thwart them. You go to a lama and they throw a more, you do this, you practice that. However, if the Buddha were here and you were to ask him for a divination, he would probably say, meditate on cause and effect, meditate on bodhicitta, meditate on emptiness. He wouldn't say this harm is caused by a god, or perform this incense offering, or this is a naga, or this is by a spirit or demon. He wouldn't say that. You know, so again, you know, it's quite powerful how he talks about that. You know. So then the last chapter is about it's called The Essence of Buddhism, and essentially it's probably nothing that you all haven't heard before. It talks about what's it talk about? It talks about dependent arising, the three types of condition, four types of reason, which we've been through before, four dependencies, and so forth. And the meaning of the word dharma, how reason is more important than faith. What does it mean to be a 21st century Buddhist? He talks about that. And then he talks about this is about gender inequality, looking down on women. Says this contravenes Buddhist tenets, and he goes into a lot of historical stuff about how the you know, that course there was discrimination against women, and because Indian society, that's how it was built, and also he talks about how men, because society was built on sort of built on might is right, the most powerful are the ones who rule, and because men are physically more powerful, therefore they rose to the top because they were the ones who could keep law and order. Where these days we don't need so much. So and he said this has happened, but he said actually in Buddhism, the Buddha himself did not actually discriminate, even though, you know, of course, yeah. I just want to get through because so then he talks about that and he mentions quite openly about that Tibet is guilty of being highly patriarchal in terms of the way it looks down upon women, and he actually quotes, you know, a few instances of that, and he doesn't sort of try to hide it at all. That he said, for example, in Tibetan, the word for widow, you know, is yukma or yuksama, and it has a kind of derogatory feel about it, the word widow. And he said, but this is pure superstition. You know, why is there no special terminology for a husband whose wife has died? You know, he's not looked down upon. How can that be right? Having to sit in the back row because of being a woman and so on are bad traditions that have been allowed to become customs. It's true, yeah. You know, and also the fact that some women are not allowed inside of protector temples, yeah. Yeah. You know, the word for woman in Tibetan is kyemen, which means lower birth, you know, and so he said, you know, all these things are wrong. And so yeah, kyemen. Yeah. So in order to put that right, he asked Dagyab Rinpoche to see if he could find a book or some examples of great women practitioners in Tibet and their history. So Dagyab Rinpoche found this book published in Lhasa called Great Stories of Tibetan Women Practitioners. He found it, and it was in Tibetan. So he extracted, I think, about 150 biographies. I think he took about 120, 125, shortened them and put them in this book. And I remember we were waiting because we had to get permission from Lhasa. So he wrote to try and get hold of the author, and he did. The author's still alive, and the author granted him permission to quote these. So it's this is his first. This book has never been translated. He goes through and he starts this book. So this is not his Holiness teaching now. This is a book that was written by someone called Kunjo Gyatso. Jigun Reza Kunjo Gyatso. I don't know who he is, but he wrote this book, and I have the Tibetan copy somewhere. And he goes through right from the very early times, from the Pugyal period, which is, the time of the Tibetan kings up until sort of the 8th century. Then came the emperors, the great emperors. And he talks about women there. For example, Tsepong Sajima Togama was the mother of Songtsen Gampo. Together with the 5 queens of Songtsen Gampo, his sister, Semon, and 31 other women, she did much for the unity of Tibet, helping to consolidate the rule, initiate the union of state, of religion, and disseminate Buddhism. Dresa Trima Le was the queen of Emperor Mangsen and the mother of Dusong Mangbo. When her husband died, the son was too young to rule, so she took up the reins of the kingdom, not once but twice. In the royal dynasty of Tibet, she is the only recognized empress and famed for being wise, brave, powerful, and open-minded. As her power grew, the might of Tibet threatened the eastern plains of China. Consequently, the minor kingdoms of Sherab and so on rose up in revolt, but she waged war against them and brought them under the rule of law and captured their kings. With this and other deeds, she consolidated the strength of the kingdom and contributed greatly to the security of Tibet. Dresa Chigyamon Sen was one of the 5 wives of Emperor Chizun Dezhen. Her achievements include constructing the Gege Dzema temple at Samye Monastery, one of the 3 queen temples. Also at Samye, she took on the responsibility of translating Buddhist works and engaged in study of meditation. With her great wisdom in administration of the kingdom, she initiated a set of laws known as the Son of Drosa. Having no children, she was among the 100 women who became novice nuns. Her ordained name was Changchukche. She was the first woman in Tibet to be ordained as a nun. So this is way back 8th century, yeah? Who else? Then I'm just going through. I don't know. And then it goes on to the period of dissolution, which is after Langdama destroyed Buddhism in sort of the 9th century. Then we have people like Digun Achi Chodun, born in 1020, was born. She went to the home of brothers Sutun Gyatso and Yungrin Gyatso and became their mutual wife. At the wedding, she magically showered the guests with whatever food and drink they desired. And the local people said that Sutun Gyatso was keeping a Dakini as a wife. She made her home at Tara Rock and had 4 sons. She liked to use corpses in the cemetery for ritual feasts. She could travel through cliffs without obstructions. Mother and all 4 sons meditated, and the sons gained great realizations. She bound by oath the 8 malicious classes of spirits and led her followers inside a deep cave where she performed a feast ritual using corpses. It is said that various powers arose in those who partook. Even today, this cave is known as Achi's Cave. Finally, in her testament, she wrote, "This body of mine has done its work. To my sons is bequeathed a special teaching. Therefore, I will become its protector." Then Dagmema, who you may have heard of, was the wife of Marpa. Dagmema was born in Lodrak and was the main consort of Marpa, who had 9 other wives. She gave birth to a son, and she also gave teachings to Jetsun Milarepa. Nima Palmo, born in 1012, devoted herself to Mapalotsawa, receiving all his teachings and putting them into practice. She was one of the 4 fortunate female disciples who attained powers. Petagunki was the younger sister of Jetsun Milarepa. When she met Milarepa in Jinyak, years after he had gone to the mountains to meditate, he encouraged her to practice the Dharma. With great faith, she entered the religious life and received the complete teachings of the Kyabgön tradition. She attained the rainbow body. Zesema or Lesebum. She was a human consort of Milarepa. She was betrothed to Milarepa when she was a child. She received teachings from him, entered her hermitage, and she attained the rainbow body. Saleh she met Milarepa and had great faith in him. She requested teaching. She became proficient in spontaneous Dharma songs. Her poetry and composition were not only remarkable, but with respect to its meaning, she was someone of great learning. She entered practice and developed signs of realization, such as the inner heat. She remained constantly by the side of the Jetsun, being the keeper of his texts. Rechungma was, she also met Jetsun Milarepa. At first, she tested him by singing him a somewhat teasing song. From his reply, she developed faith. She offered him all her jewelry and followed him as a servant. He gave instructions on inner heat. After 3 days, inner heat arose, and she only needed a thin cloth, for which she became known as Rechungma. Rechungma means little cloth, right? Cloth, Re means someone who wears a cloth, and Chungma means like a smaller disciple. You know? After months, she received all the teachings on the 6 yogas of Naropa. Later, she met Rechungpa. She offered him details of her insights and saw that she was a suitable vessel. He gave her oral transmission instructions, and she became his wife. She was one of the realized consorts of Rechungpa. For 8 years, she stopped speaking, meditating continuously like the current of a river, and attained the 10 signs of practice and the 8 qualities. She also attained the rainbow body. Naro Burnchum entered the burn. She was a Burnball, and she taught it to her brother. Later, Burnchung and Milarepa had a contest of magical powers. Milarepa defeated Burnchung, and Kailash, Mount Kailash, became a Kaju place. At that time, Naro Burnchum, that's his sister, was many times greater in magic and power than her brother. And Jetsun Milarepa realized it would be difficult to beat her in a contest of powers. Therefore, he appealed to her by gentle means and was able to convert her. And so on. Nangsa Obum. Nangsa Obum, I know because, yeah, Nangsa Obum, there's an opera about Nangsa Obum. She became the bride of the Renang governor and gave birth to a son. However, the governor's sister, fearing that she would lose her authority to Nangsa, made false accusations against her. Not realizing this, the governor beat Nangsa until she died. However, she returned to life, and I think she was the first death returner, Delok. She fled to Yalung, where she received Dzogchen and other teachings from Lama Saki Gyaltsen, and retreated into meditation. The source of water she used in practice and the imprints of her body in the cave rocks can still be seen today. Ultimately, she attained the rainbow body. The story of her returning from death spread through Tibet and was included in the repertoire of Tibetan folk operas. I translated the 8 great folk operas of Tibet, and Nangsa Ubum is one of them, and you can see this opera being performed in Dharamsala today. It's very, very famous, and she was this wonderful woman who was a Delok. Delok means De means death, and Lok means reversing. She returned from death. She was beaten, and the Lord of Death appeared to her and said, "Your time is not yet." Not yet. You have still got more to do. So she returned to life, and there's a whole story where she was lying on a rock, and it's one of the she was being looked over by, guarded by somebody, and suddenly she woke up and freaked this poor guy out. And so very famous woman, Nangsa Abum is called. Then there's Jomo Jemo, lived in a mountain hermitage. Machik, a lot of Machik, right? Machik Shama, trained in the Tantras and received many tantric practices from Malotsawa, to whom she became consort. She went into retreat for 4 years. When she was residing in Upper Lower Zong for 4 months at a time, she was able to hold down the red and white elements within her bodies. She attained qualities such as knowing how to manifest a body wherever she wished, and could bring the inner winds to wherever she desired. At the age of 28, Malatsoa passed away, and so she performed extensive funeral rituals for him. Then for 3 years, she was afflicted by 7 kinds of hindrances, and nothing she did could dispel them. Therefore, she went to Dingri to meet Padampa Sangye. You all know him. And by following his instructions, she was rid herself of hindrances. Because of her attainment of power, she visited the 24 regions and many frightening places in Tibet, where she dwelt and meditated. Many astonishing events occurred to her, such as Dakinis coming to wait upon her. In some texts, she is called Shama Laje, which means doctor, right? Laje means doctor. Therefore, she must have been learned in medicine. Machik Labdun, or you all have heard of her, was born in Dromwood. You can read her biography elsewhere, I mean, because she's very famous. And I think, what's her name? Tara Mandala. What's her name? The woman. Anyway, she's very famous.
Something Alione.
Yeah, Alioni. Yeah, Alioni. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I'm not going to read her because you can read her, but she's very famous. This is still in the 11th century, right? Chukomosa Gendrin Ki, she met Padampa Sangye, became a self-liberated yogini. She wrote many songs, such as, "There is the wish-fulfilling jewel of one's own mind and the wish-fulfilling jewel of the ocean. To accomplish the needs of this and future lives, this beggar woman chooses the jewel of the mind itself. As provisions for death, the harvest of the 2 accumulations. As provisions of life, the harvest of wealth and possessions. The wise woman attends to her wealth. This beggar woman makes ready provisions for death. Death is the enemy of the body. The 5 poisons the enemy of the mind. There is inner and outer bravery. The beggar woman subdues the enemies of the 5 poisons. There is the fortress, stronghold of the proud and famous, and unmoving concentration, stronghold of the mind. Both will guard the turret of fearlessness. This beggar woman guards the turret of concentration." Yeah. And then there are more. Then there is the 24 Jomo. Jomo means like sort of like Jo means Lord. Jomo means the famous masters. There's Jomo. There are I think 24 of these. Jomo. They're very little short. They're just listed. They're short, very short sort of names of her. Then what else? And there is the leper of Ulka. I cannot find the name of this woman, but she was born in Ulka. She had been afflicted with leprosy for a long time. Her limbs were eaten away, and she was in a wretched state. The unparalleled Gampopa, Takpolaje, was renowned as having a powerful blessing, and that merely meeting him would bring great benefit. She was not able to approach him, but while looking in the direction of where he was staying, she saw a protruding white snow mountain. Gazing at it, she experienced great joy and devotion. He became cured of her leprosy. She also experienced signs of Mahamudra realization, and blissful heat automatically arose within her. In a state of limitless joy, she went to meet the Lama. He also saw her as a suitable recipient and gave her meditation instructions. And in a short time in the locality of Peochung, she became a remarkable nun. Then Machik Unjo, she became a great yogini who sang many songs of realization. Having no attachment to possession, she said, with all material goods, the nature of illusion, where can there be miserliness? With this precious human birth of opportunity and leisure given over to Dharma Supreme, the three vows are produced in the mind. Through the wish-fulfilling oral lineage transmission, misconception was severed, and so on. Then there's others. Maje Nyangmo from the Aro Yeshe tradition. She became a Dharma master of the Aro tradition. This is Western guy, isn't there, who lives in England, who calls himself. He was recognized as a tulku of this Aro tradition. Nyulmo Galme Cham. She received many teachings on sutra from Dhamma Bodhi. She entered Rainbow Body. Sumu Gudum Bum. She became a nun, a natural yogini, actualized the 2 stages of Tantra path. She was a great scholar practitioner. She bestowed empowerments and so forth. Machi Jobum. Machi Jobum. It just goes on and on. There's so many of them. I can't read all these. But
it's nice to know there are so many of them.
There are so many of them. I mean, I
had no idea that someone had actually even compiles, such a lovely list of biographies.
Yeah. And at the end, there's also the female tulkus. There are two incarnation lines. There's the Doje Pamo, Samding Doje Pamo, and Kungri Kandroma. So Samding Doje Pamo comes from the central region of Tibet, and she follows the Bodong. Bodong was a tradition founded by Bodong Chokle Namgyel. It has kind of sort of Jonong. And there are 12 incarnations, starting from the 15th century and going up to the present time. The 12th present incarnation, born in 1938. She's actually become quite political. She's a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the People's Congress. But there are 12 incarnations of her. Then there's the Kungri Kandroma incarnations. That has 6 incarnations, up to and one is still alive. In 1990, she was 51 years old. That's the 6th incarnation. So there are those. Then before that, there is Pandro, more recent. There's Pandro Tamdrin Lama, 1923 to 1979. was born in Gojo. She received the complete empowerments, transmissions, and core instructions of her father's treasure texts. Her father was a Tetun. In particular, she constantly practiced guiding the winds from the Doji Pamo tradition and could exist on elixir pills, i.e. without eating, for 21 weeks. And on space elixir is actually not eating anything, but is using the kind of winds. However, her main practice was her father's treasure text, the Black Golden Seal, Profoundest Essence. Her father declared that she was a consort whose touch brought liberation. With a single strand of her hair, she could remove cataracts from people's eyes. With no anger or desire, she did not recognize any division into friend and enemy. Yeah. When she was 57, she called her disciples together and said, "Now, do not be sad. Death is the inevitable end to birth. My allotted lifespan was 52 years old, but by the kindness of my Lama and because of my little daughter, I have been able to live a little longer. I have had visions of Pamon a few times. I must go now for a while to the realm of turquoise leaves. Do not hold on to my body out of attachment." That evening she passed away. Her body was left for 7 days, after which it dissolved into light, leaving a corpse of only 26 centimeters in height. This was witnessed by thousands in the local community. She died in 1979, so fairly recently then. Then, who else? Dr. Yangchen Lama, or Kondo Yanga, born in 1907, was born in Bamake, you know, that magic place, which is said to be a hidden place of sort of mystical visions. Yeah, I think I've heard of her. Anyway, her father encouraged her to study medical texts, and in a very short time, she was able to recite 15 pages. When she was 11 and her father was living in Taglong, 2 doctors arrived from the medical college in Lhasa. While they were receiving transmissions and teachings on medical practice from her father, he expressed to them his wish that his daughter learn surgical techniques of correcting eyesight at the medical college. Consequently, by the age of 13, she was working in medical practice and traveled to the medical college, where the director urged her to learn these techniques. When she had mastered them, she restored the sight of many poor people. I think this is cataract operations. Not only did she not take any money, but for the treatment of wind ailments and so on, she even gave away her own provisions. In this way, she was of huge benefit to the sick and ailing who came to her from all over Tibet. As a result, people gave her the affectionate name Kando, Yanga, Dakini, a pleasing voice. In 1948, she traveled to Bhutan, where she treated the king, Jigme Wanchuk, for eye problems. Under the auspices of the medical college, she performed eye surgery and dispensed medicine in 18 Tibetan districts. And over 3 years, she restored sight to about 300 patients. Because of her treatments were so effective, she became very famous. And in 1958, she joined the Medical Center organization. There has never been such a renowned female doctor. And as a result, those who were able apply the effective treatments for women and children's diseases described in the medical text for the illness himself were almost non-existent. It was Yangchen Lama who completely restored these treatments. She was inducted as a worker of the state and appointed first director of gynecology and pediatric department. In 1964, she wrote a paper on gynecological treatments and presented it to a conference, and her fame and reputation grew more. She was the first female doctor of Lhasa Medical College. Yeah. And so on. And so it goes on. I mean, I can't read these because it's just too much. I mean, there's so many here. But the point is that this guy, Kunjo Gyatso, has researched and found these women. So there are records of them, but you won't read them in most texts because they've all been sort of airbrushed out. But the point His Holiness is making is that there are, and there were, and there still are, great female practitioners who deserve mention, and at least in this book, I mean, most of the Tibetan book is here. It's been translated, and there are a few, and Dagyab Rinpoche has somewhat shortened the biographies, and but the essential biographical details are all here. And so yeah. So there you go. So I mean, if you want to know more, you're going to have to get the book, I'm afraid. That's it, really. It's 5 to 4. So I mean, we've done maybe about 15% of this book, 20% of the book, but essentially it's this is the Dalai Lama's. It's called the stages of the path, right? It's called that. It's not a lamrim in the sense that lamrim chemo is, but it is a lamrim in the sense that it guides sort of Buddhist and non-Buddhist. Lamrim means stages of the path, right? So it helps Buddhists and non-Buddhist Westerners and Tibetans to move along a path towards a better life and happiness and a freedom, suffering, which basically is what his role in this world is. As he said many times, I'm not here to convert people to Buddhism. he said that's not the point. Bodhisattva, doesn't have to convert people to Buddhism. They have to make people happy. So this is what he does. He doesn't, although of course he himself a very strict monk. When it comes to very strict, in the Vinaya side of life, he's very strict, follows that. But that's personal to him because, the Pratimoksha vows come under the section of, is Rongden, Shenden. Rongden means work for yourself, and Shenden means work for others. And, his ethics and so forth, he keeps very strict, but he keeps it quiet. He doesn't talk about it. But when it comes to talking to the world and trying his best to sort of make the world a better place, he doesn't push Buddhism down people's throats, not in the slightest. In fact, he can be quite critical of the Tibetan, some of the Tibetan sort of Buddhist culture, the way it's developed. There's one point where he talks about when he was in Lhasa as a young child, young man or something, he used to bemoan the way that there was so much adherence to sort of rituals and just sort of empty traditions and ceremonies and lots of flamboyant sort of displays of tradition. He said nothing really got to the essential meaning, and he doesn't actually go and say as much, but he says that we as a society in the 40s or 50s and 60s, we could have done so much more for our country in sort of saving it from the Chinese. I mean, maybe we were too. I'm not quoting him now, but I know Thupten Jinpa said the same thing. Too inward looking, not enough sort of embracing the world, and we are a Buddhist country. It's interesting. I often wonder how when lamas come to the West, what do they make of all these? There are more views than there are people sometimes, aren't there? There's not only there's science, but there's religion, there's Islam, there's humanists, there's atheist views. There are so many sort of traditions. In Tibet, there was only one, and you revered it. But that's completely not the case in Tibetan in Western societies, and I think it's an important point, especially for us. You know, when we take on the Tibetan tradition, we've got to modernize it. We've got to sort of somehow not dumb it down, not at all, but somehow we've got to sort of assimilate it so that it fits our, you know, we're not sort of putting on clothes that don't fit. You know, we got to wear clothes that suit the environment that we're in. That's what we do. We don't put on weird clothes that don't fit for the sake of it. We've got to, we all need clothes and we all need religion, but it's got to be one that's sort of essential. And I think this is what he is saying, basically. You know, he's trying to do that. And long may he continue. All right, so thank you very much. I'm sorry I was a bit rough, but I you know, maybe I don't know.
I think you will inspire a lot of people. Like you inspired me. Like I had the book, but I hadn't really read it. Now I'm like so keen to dive deeper into it.
Okay, great, good. I mean, don't you know, one thing about, but it doesn't flow from beginning to end like a sort of, it doesn't have a sort of, it can be a bit bitty, which has a good side because it means you can just open it at any page, you know, just open anywhere and just read. So open it. Therefore, if you're able to tame your mind stream by pure practice of mixing your mind with Dharma, what greater joy is there for virtuous deities? I think it is only natural for those deities bound by our instruction to be drawn to such people. You can just open it as a sort of as a morning divination. You know, what shall I do? What shall I do today? And you just open it up and see what that's how I see it. It's not a book to be read from cover to cover, not really. So yeah.
So Gavin, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
sharing.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And
Thank you,
also,
Gavin.
and we look forward to you coming back when you finish translating the Panchen Lama's Song and Views.
I finished
you said?
that. I finished his. Now I'm doing, I mean, that was a very short text. After
Okay.
that, I did one work by the fifth Dalai Lama. The fifth Dalai Lama is very difficult to understand. You know, now I'm doing something by Shakya. I mean, it's wonderful. I never know who's coming next. Half of these people I've never heard. Oh, there's even one by the sixth Dalai Lama there. Look, so that should be good.
Is your translation of the Panchen Lama available? Has it been published?
No, it's in here. It'll be published by Jimba when it's part of his series. It's called
Okay.
it will come out when, you know, it's part of his Library of Tibetan Classic series, and it's under the one of, it's called Advice and Spiritual Songs, and
Okay.
it's been really helpful for me. I've learned, I mean, there are Bernbo practitioners you know, talking about Bernbo practices. I don't know anything about Bernbo, you know, and it's been especially Dzogchen. I mean, the Dzogchen and the Mahamudra stuff has been really an eye-opener for me because I've never had time to sort of look into Dzogchen. I've never had Dzogchen teachings. I've never had teachers from any other tradition other than Gelugpa, never. Because that's, you know, that's what I am. You know, but I always have great interest in them. And you know, and so it's been very useful for me, you know, for that, you know.
So we look forward to the publication of that book so we can have you back.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do one of this. Yeah, okay, yeah.
That would be
Okay,
wonderful.
thank you. John,
Thank you
take
so
care.
much. Safe
See
travels to
you.
Dharamsala.
Yeah, I will, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Bye, Neely.
Yeah.
Bye, Sheila. Bye, John.
Bye now. Take care of
Bye-bye.
yourself.